In 1937, the people of Southbury, Connecticut took a stand and turned back an organization which aligned itself with the Nazi movement in Germany. Almost 75 years later, a group of Southbury citizens came together to honor those brave men and women with a celebration in November of 2012. That weekend would include ceremonies and events with some of the people who could still remember when prejudice and evil paid a visit to their small town. As part of those celebrations, it was decided that a film documenting the little-known story should be created. That's me on the camera in one of the press clippings back in September 2012. I'm Scott Sniffen, a filmmaker and Southbury resident. So is that the sermon? Or is that some of that?
That's the excerpt from the sermon.
The sermon, yeah. When I received the privilege to create this film, I would have less than 2 months to complete the task. It seemed daunting at the time, but upon reflection, I noticed an ironic parallel to the events of 1937. 2 months was just about the same amount of time the people of Southbury took to complete their historical mission. Now, one has to understand everyone involved in this project thought that when the film would screen in November, we might get maybe 100 to 150 people together at the town hall.
The important thing we all have to do is use our moral convictions to say, I've got to make a stand. In 1937, the people of Southbury made a stand. They were right. I think we should celebrate that.
As the film was nearing completion, I thought it would be a good idea to create a trailer for the film. I uploaded this promo on YouTube, and in our small little town, it went viral. Plans were quickly made to move from the town hall and secure the Heritage Hotel for the screening. As reservations poured in, we realized we needed to again move the venue, this time to the Pomperaug High School auditorium, which seats about 1,000 people. So, attendance was growing, and I hadn't even finished the film yet. Needless to say, the pressure was on. But another parallel I realized looking back is that, like the people of Southbury 75 years ago, we too had to move to a larger venue due to the interest of town citizens.
So what kind of trim was on it? Or
It was white.
It was all white?
Earlier that weekend, the Lindsay sisters traveled up from Virginia for the festivities and visited the house they lived in over in South Britain. Escorted by Reverend Wall and some of their family, they toured the home, which brought back quite a few memories. Lois talked about how her dad, Reverend Lindsay, had hid letters supporting his efforts in the attic. She recounted how her father was worried Bund members might try to break in and steal the letters and other material which revealed the true intentions of the Bund.
The attic is where Daddy hid the papers that people had written him, the letters they had written telling about their own experiences with the Nazis in Germany. So Daddy hid them in the rafters, and he showed me where they were.
In fact, at the time of the events, there was a break-in at the home, and Reverend Lindsay's desk was ransacked, but the intruders were never caught. They toured the old town hall where an exhibit recounting the events of 37 was on display. We retraced the steps of the townspeople to the South Britain Congregational Church, where the historical meetings took place.
And so then you guys had to sit down here,
This
right?
is our place, right there, and I sat right
All right,
there.
tomorrow you're sitting here. Okay.
It was quite the visit for the sisters to come back all these years later. It was also a chance for their children to see the places their grandfather had made history.
It's been a fantastic journey. We've heard these stories all our lives, and it's very fun to come and see the actual buildings and put the buildings together with the many stories we've heard over our childhood.
It's really great being here and for this big honor for my grandfather. He was a great man, and I'm loving for my aunt and my mother to enjoy this historical time.
I just learned about my grandfather's involvement in the German-American Bund probably about 10 years ago. So once I found out, I started sharing letters with my students I teach in middle school, and it's just been great.
Knowing him as I did, he's very stalwart and very committed man to what he believes in, and I'm very proud of him for what he did. I think he was tremendous bravery there.
Like my mother says, he could stand up for himself, and he knew what was right. He knew the right thing to do, and I'm very proud of him.
This is just a beautiful town, and the people here are great, and I appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
So on Sunday, November 18th, the people of Southbury would gather once again. Many who attended were very young at the time, or just recalled their mom and dad talking about when the Nazis came to town. Of course, the Lindsay and Lewis sisters were in attendance, and other people appearing in the film also came, including the then 99-year-old Lillian Hickok Wentworth, who, because of the events in 1937, was inspired to write her master's thesis on the German-American Bund. As a filmmaker, the best part of the process is sharing your film with an audience. That's, of course, if the audience likes your film.
When I first heard about the events in Southbury in the winter of 1937 from one of our town
As our first
historians,
selectman, Ed Edelson, made his remarks, I thought to myself, I hope they like it.
And then I want to also congratulate my cast, who are all the people who were in it.
I tried my best to tell the story as honestly as I could and capture the spirit and patriotism of those brave souls all those years ago.
99 years young.
One thing for sure I do remember about that moment. On that day, looking out at the audience, I was proud to be a citizen of Southbury. The press the next day was quite impressive. There we were on the front pages of the papers, not unlike the press received by the events back in 1937. There was such an interest in the film that 2 more screenings packed the meeting space at the town hall the following Tuesday. To my relief, the film was well received and soon went on a sort of a road show across the state, screening at the state capitol, schools, and theaters. The Southbury Historical Society Committee and myself received state citations recognizing our efforts on the project. And Home of the Brave was an official selection at the Boston International Film Festival. There I am on the red carpet with my beautiful wife Tracy, who, when I was considering this project, urged me to take on the film. Thanks, honey. The film even made its way, via Ed Edelson, all the way to Israel, where I am proud to say it is now on permanent archive at the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum. One notable screening was at the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C., where Senator Chris Murphy introduced the film. It was great to see Lois and Carol Lindsay again and get a chance to meet their proud grandchildren. And it's currently being considered for national educational distribution by the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. And several schools around the country, including Region 15, have screened the film in classrooms.
How do you think the people of Southbury would respond today if a similar organization tried to come here? Maybe we can ask the audience. No.
You know, I think that the response to this story and the response to Scott's amazing film and all of our being here shows that the response of our town would be that we stand very much towards understanding, tolerance and freedom and against prejudice and discrimination. That's part of the ethos of this town.
And I have to thank the Southbury Historical Society for letting me tell this little piece of Southbury history. When you think about it, I still find it amazing that 4 years before this country got involved in World War II, the people of Southbury recognized what the German-American Bund represented.
It's almost a biblical story of people standing up against oppression, people standing up against hate, and to see it done in a nonviolent way and be successful is what makes it an important story.
When she was on the screen, I was like, ah, that's my grandma.
My husband's grandfather was part of this movement because he was the Justice of the Peace at the time, and he was instrumental in, with Mr. Core and Mr. Hitchcock to enforce the blue law. And he used to tell us great stories about that. I'm sorry there's nothing written down to prove it, but we know it to be fact. His name was Alric Nelson. So right in the neighborhood of Kettletown, and I still live on Kettletown.
It should be shown to more people. I think it's a good thing for people to see this kind of thing. Bit of history and something we should be proud of, I guess.
Even after it happened, it was still conversations, you know, with people that were here when it was growing up. Because my parents were Stones that lived right on Main Street across from the United Church of Christ.
It was really well balanced, and I've learned things about my father-in-law that I never knew, and I learned especially about his bravery. and his willingness to speak up for what is right.
Gave me a lot of information I was not aware of prior to seeing the film. Heard little bits and pieces of it throughout the town, but thought it was very well done, very well executed, and hope it goes national.
I was saying to the daughters of Reverend Lindsay yesterday, how many people after 75 years have something that they did brought up and celebrated by a community? It's just a wonderful remembrance, but also it moves us forward to be more proactive ourselves in combating hate and standing up for what's right.
It's too bad some of the older people couldn't have really lived to see this happen, what they fought for.
He caught everything that's great about this community. Everything, that this community, regardless of when we disagree, we still stand together when the need arises.
Southbury was a relatively poor community in terms of material things, but clearly it was a community that was rich in terms of its spirit and its understanding of what was going on in the world, and weren't confused by things that seemed to confuse people in other parts of the country.
His Jewish name is Benjamin, mine is Yosef. In the Bible, it was Joseph and Benjamin, they were brothers. And it turns out that, if I may say, his father and my grandfather both were from the same town in Poland, and they both survived the Holocaust. So he's a first-generation Holocaust survivor, I'm a second-generation survivor. To see this film is quite moving, to see that in this country there were people who stood up and were really moral and ethical, and no matter race, color, religion, really respected humanity is, I think, certainly as a second-generation Holocaust survivor, it brought me to tears.
I thought it was very emotional and showed that patriotism as we used to know it, I wish it'd come back. I really do. I thought it was very touching.
Yes, Home of the Brave has had quite the run, certainly far beyond my expectations. As I think back on that day in November, when so many gathered to see the film, I was taken by the outpouring of emotion. So many were brought to tears.
That was very interesting to see it. It really, it gave me chills to think how our life could be different.
But I realized these were not tears of sadness, but emotions stirred by the film. It brought me back to the town hall, where the Lindsay family had viewed the exhibit. I could see the pride in their eyes. And like the Lindsays, the audience was somehow touched as well. Maybe a memory of their childhood, pictures of family and friends, old photographs of days gone by. Perhaps in some way, by watching my little film, fond memories of their mom and dad were reawakened. Proud thoughts of a people who took a stand and said no to prejudice and hate, patriots of an era sometimes forgotten. I guess I had touched their hearts. Maybe that's why after Lois Lindsay saw the film for the first time, she handed me a small note. It was a quote by Edmund Burke. It read, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing."
And the people of Southbury did something.